And we pick up now on that ringing appeal with an eminent panel that includes leaders working to make the European Union a model of building back better. It is my great pleasure to welcome the President of Slovakia, Zuzana Čaputová, and the President of Croatia, Zoran Milanovic. Please, you may take your seats. And also with us, joining virtually from Brussels, is the Executive Vice President of the European Union Commission, Frans Timmermans. Our title is Reacting to the Climate Crisis, the European Green Deal, and we want to dig deeper on some of the issues and messages we've been hearing. So President Čaputová, let me perhaps start with you. And you entered office last year with a very long record as an environmental campaigner, as a lawyer, and somebody who had pushed hard for change in her country. So you have, in fact, one of Europe's most energy-intensive economies facing significant challenges. What are you doing to make sure that Slovakia, in fact, will tackle the climate crisis and become part of the solution?
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this very important conference and allow me my short speech. Mr. President van der Bellen and Milanovic, Chancellor Kurz, Governor Schwarzenegger, ladies and gentlemen, it's hot. And it is getting hotter and hotter. We can feel it, can we? As political leaders, cannot pretend that climate crisis is not urgent. But our reactions to date are not cool. In fact, they are rather lukewarm. We already consume 1.5 times more than the Earth's resource capacity. We have a choice. We can continue this experiment with our planet, or we can choose to act. To act means recognizing that time for tepid diplomacy or greenwashing has passed. Change is possible. We can build economies that are both green and prosperous. We can breathe clean air. We can save our planet. But we have to start from ourselves. I started with my own environment, my office. We adopted a zero-waste strategy and are reducing our CO2 footprint. Slovak presidential office will become carbon neutral by 2030. We will install photovoltaic systems and gradually replace our cars with electric and hybrid ones. We will plant green roofs and at least 1,300 trees a year, starting my first 500 next month. We are already using 100% green electricity. We stopped using plastic. We have bee colonies in the presidential garden, and just last week we produced our first honey. I know it might seem too little, and it will be if no one joins in. Experts estimate that by 2100, the climate change will be 5 times as deadly as COVID-19. Yet some still question the devastating and irreversible consequences of climate change. We have been able to organize ourselves and create over 20 parallel teams worldwide to develop anti-COVID vaccine because we lacked the so much needed knowledge. In climate change, we all know what to do. We just need to show a genuine will and act together as one. My office is rather small, but our goals are not small at all. In Slovakia, we will stop using coal as a source of energy by 2023, and we will fully decarbonize our electric energy sector by 2030. We are increasing the share of renewables. We are introducing a government program to retrofit buildings and improve energy efficiency. This is not greenwashing. These concrete actions affect how people think and live. It is just a start. We must use the EU recovery plan and the Green Deal to prompt the whole of society transformation. Because this is what stopping climate change requires. Some might think this is too ambitious or impossible, but I choose to follow Nelson Mandela. It always seems impossible until it's done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Chaputova, for outlining your ambitious plans. President Milanovic, just this summer, you announced that you will be joining President van der Belen's initiative for more climate ambition. Why did you take that step, and what is the situation in Croatia? What needs to change?
Ladies and gentlemen, dear Hans, thank you for the invitation. Madam Chaputova, Franz Timmermans, haven't seen you for quite long, 5 years. Men can pick one's company, so I thought by accepting the invitation of the Austrian president to join this initiative, I picked the good company for the good cause. That's in a nutshell everything. Croatia cannot reach far. We are a small country. We are heavily reliant, I would say all too reliant on the tourist economy, which again, as it goes without saying, depends on the and is very associated with the preservation of the environment. So that's what we make for a living. In more perfect circumstances, I would like to see Croatia as a country developing iPhone, but in the absence thereof, we do what we can. So the clean environment and the balance of nature matters big time in Croatia. By the estimates of the European Energy Agency, Croatia has been most adversely affected environmentally of all European countries, not the most, the third. So ignominious third place by all accounts and standards of environment taken together. Now, it's hardly palpable or reachable by the common human senses. You cannot see it around, but that's what counts. I don't know how they count it, but they do it. And that should be taken into account. On the surface, in Croatia, everything looks fine. It's clean, it's attractive. We draw on the renewable resources way above, head and shoulders above European average, because these are the circumstances, because we can. So Albania does. Hydroenergy, Croatia, hydro plus other sources, but it's just a fraction of the whole picture. In a nutshell, there is actually English curse which has been wrongly associated with the Chinese. No Chinese sources support it. May you live in interesting times. So we do actually live in the interesting times. The world is changing. All the circumstantial evidences, if you don't trust science, tell you that something weird and dangerous is going on. If you don't trust in scientific causation, then the temporal correlation would tell you the story. Simply, these are the things that we haven't seen before, and it will affect our lives and our economies gravely. If we don't move from this point, if we don't take decisive action to bring this intervention to a close. This is actually a matter of political will, a very vague and worn-out phrase used by everybody, but essentially the matter of institutions, because the human civilization, the human history, has not been uninterrupted path and pattern of progress. In natural philosophy, in science, in small, painful, piecemeal improvements and incremental advance, but it has been, but in institutional terms, it hasn't. So people, human race, proved many times, are proving time and again that they have that weird capacity to mess it up and to fail miserably. You make technological process, you make progress in the natural philosophy of the yester century and yesteryear, but somehow human societal institutions fail. And this is the story not about science, not about progress. Actually, we have it too much. It's an overdose. It's about ability of institutions, of laws, of imposed kind of behavior and accepted kind of behavior to simply take a lead in the society. We can make decent living, we can make great living, but something has to change. It is about institutions. It wouldn't be for the first time in the human history of the modern era, pre-modern era, that we came to a lull, to stand still, or into the reverse mode, because we were simply too arrogant. Now I'm sounding like a preacher, and since preacher I'm not, I will stop here.
Thank you very much, President Milanovic. And thank you also for your reminder that we need to listen to the science and the facts. For many people who were here last year, that will remind them of the words of Greta Thunberg, who called upon us to do exactly that.
Give them benefit of doubt.
Thank you so much. Let us go now to Brussels and Vice President Timmermans. And we heard a bold call, Mr. Timmermans, yesterday from the Commission's President, Ursula von der Leyen, wanting to ratchet up the EU's climate targets to 55% reductions of CO2 by 2030. So let me ask you how you want to turn that into ambitious action on the ground.
Well, as you know, by the way, hello to everyone there, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. As you know, our member states have decided that Europe needs to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. So if you want to get there, you need to have a plan. You can't just have this ambition and then do nothing and just wait for things to happen. So what we've done is actually mapped out what needs to be done between now and 2050 in steps to get us to where we need to be. And we took a deep dive into our societies and economies, and then we saw that we can accelerate this if we reduce our emissions by 55% as compared to 1990 in 2030. We can do that. But to do that, we will need to look at our emissions in our cars, we will need to look at our energy sector, at the built environment, etc., etc. And for all of this, we will have concrete plans that we will submit to the European Parliament and to the member states next year. And I think it is important to emphasize that we now probably have 1 decade where we could fix this. You know, I became a grandfather for the first time 2 months ago. And I was holding my grandson, and I was looking at him and his total defenselessness. And I was thinking, if we don't, in the years to come, if we don't set our planet on a different course, what sort of planet will he inherit? What sort of planet will we have in 20 years from now if we don't really start making some radical choices right now? And that is driving me to make sure that we make these proposals, that these proposals are realistic. Our impact assessment shows they're feasible. We can do this. Of course, it's going to be difficult. But as Antonio Guterres said, just imagine if we do nothing, what the cost will be to our society, how the inequalities that already are horrible in our society will increase. You know, I know that Governor Schwarzenegger's home state is now suffering so much. I mean, these are horrible images we get from California. We don't want that. We want to do something to prevent that. And the beautiful thing is, although it's hard, it can be done. We have the technology, we have the people. What it needs, and I really want to echo what was said earlier, what we need is political will. We can get this organized. That's why the European Commission is proposing this roadmap. If we take this step by step, we will get to minus 55% in 2030, and then the trajectory from 2030 to 2050 becomes a lot more feasible. If we fail in the years to come, then it's going to be extremely difficult to get to climate neutrality in 2050. And if we fail there, I mean, we've already seen what the effects are of 1 degree increase of temperature. I just don't want to imagine what happens if we have 2 or 3 degrees increase.
Thank you very much, Vice President. We'll come back to you in just a moment, but let me pick up on the question of political will with a really quick follow-up to the 2 presidents and request for a 2-sentence answer, because unfortunately we're a bit over time. But here's my question. You talked yourself about the fact that the EU needs to move as one. As we know, the EU is not always great at moving as one. So let me ask how optimistic you are that the European Union member states jointly can reach these ambitious new targets? And please, 2 sentences.
I have trust because all of this is about justice, environmental justice. It is about our accountability. For Slovakia, it's a very useful recovery fund because we need to transform our economy to be more greener and more innovative.
So I gather that's an optimistic yes. And how about you, President Milanovic?
I have to be frank and tell you that due to the noise, I couldn't be able to grasp the question.
Okay. The question was, picking up on what we just heard from Vice President Timmermans in regard to political will, I asked whether you are optimistic that the political will is truly there in the EU to make these bold steps by 2030, and with the request for a very quick answer.
Very briefly, yes. I think people in Europe, majority, grasp from the old, instruction, when in doubt, what do? If it walks like duck, if it talks like duck, if it flies like duck, then it must be duck. So this is duck. This is the crisis, and the vast majority of the European population grasps that very fact, and it translates into politics, into voting, and into policies. And this is policy, and this is unstoppable mechanism. So yes, I'm an optimist, because Europe has been, but sometimes has not been, but then now again is the best place and the best region in the world to live, to raise kids, and to think about the future, and to work on the personal, family, and societal improvement. This is the best place.
And the fact that voters perhaps are moving to see it that way, your presence here, of course, is testimony to that. 2 recently elected climate progressives with us here today. So we also have a message from Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who wants to weigh in on the same issue.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, this is Pedro Sánchez, Prime Minister of Spain. COVID-19 has triggered an unprecedented crisis that could change the course of history. It has accelerated already ongoing deep transformations, and it has underscored the need to review our relationship with nature. We can deal with this crisis in 2 ways: by simply coping or by driving systemic change to build back better. I definitely choose the second option. One of our goals must be to stop and to adapt our world, our societies to climate change, while ensuring sustainable growth that secures people's livelihoods and well-being. We cannot wait until the pandemic is over. On the contrary, we must use recovery policies to transition faster towards a more sustainable economic model that leaves no one behind and preserves nature. My country, Spain's Green Recovery Plan, in line with the European Green Deal, aims to accelerate the WIN ecological and digital transformations. To this end, we have adopted an ambitious energy and climate strategy with cutting-edge targets on emissions, reductions, and renewable energy production. We recently approved a circular economy strategy, and we are in the process of approving a new climate change and ecological transition law before our national parliament. What the world needs now is both leadership and a commitment to emerge stronger from this crisis. Spain is ready to lead the way. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez there. Let's go back to Brussels now for one last question to Vice President Timmermans. And again, it picks up on that issue of political will. 10 years isn't a lot of time. The climate clock is ticking. So what do you plan to do quite concretely to bring the 27 EU member states along on this journey and reach those goals in 2030?
We need to act now. We've asked member states to give us their recovery plans by the middle of October. We've given them today the guidelines of what we expect from the recovery plans. We want to spend more than 30% in the recovery on climate policy. We want to make sure that we take our economy into the future very quickly. Most of our industries are in a deep need of restructuring anyway because of the pandemic and the consequences in the economy of that. So we need to act now. 10 years seems like a long time, but it's a blink of an eye. It's been 30 years since Total Recall. It's been 30 years since Kindergarten Cop. I mean, these things go so fast that we have to act now, and we can do it because the pandemic leaves us no choice. We have to invest. We've mobilized an enormous amount of money to be able to invest now. We probably can't do this exercise again anytime soon. So, as Antonio Guterres said, if we waste this money now, if we throw it away at the old economy, what would we then have to show for ourselves if we have to be accountable to our children and grandchildren for the planet we hand over to them? So we need to act now with precise plans. How are we going to restructure the car industry? How are we going to make sure that we move to sustainable energy sources? How we make sure that we change the chemical industry? How we make sure that we come with a huge renovation wave that will help houses and buildings all over Europe to adapt to become climate neutral. This will lead to the fight against energy poverty. It will improve the quality of our housing and our living standards in Europe. And it will create a lot of economic opportunity, especially for small and medium-sized enterprise. We need to act now.
Thank you very much to Vice President Timmermans in Brussels, to President Chaputova here with us in Vienna, and President Milanovic as well for this very thought-provoking conversation. Let's give them a warm round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. So, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I know you've been following that discussion. What do you say to these very ambitious plans here in Europe?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to President Chaputova and President Milanovic and Vice President Timmermans, because I think they're Team Europe. I mean, this is really, they can make it happen if they all work together. And to me, the key thing is that we don't just make up new plans, but I'm more interested in what happens with the 2015 agreement, COP21 in Paris, because we all know that 70% of the countries did not follow through with their promises. So to me, I'm more interested right now to also hear about what happens to those kind of promises. Are we meeting those and then go on to the next thing? But I think it was very encouraging news what I just heard from all three gentlemen, and that's why we call them Team Europe. They're great partners there. So that's really good. And talking about great news, I have some really great surprise here for you, because this morning I woke up basically Jim Cameron. And Jim Cameron directed, as everyone knows, Terminator 1, Terminator 2, and True Lies. And he is doing right now Avatar in New Zealand. And so because of the time change, they're like 18 hours ahead of us and all this stuff, I woke him up and I said, look, you got to do this interview with me because I want to talk to you about the environment, because I've learned more about the environment from you than from anyone else. You have been really fantastic about this. So he was able to sit down with me, and now let's listen to this interview that I have done today with Jim Cameron, with my very good friend.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, for doing this interview. This is really great. As you know, the Austrian World Summit for the environment is very important to me. And so it's great to have you be part of the program.
Yeah, it's a really important thing that you're doing, and I know it's tough now with COVID and nobody can travel to generate some excitement and interest around this. But of course, you pulled together a lot of important people to discuss this, super important topic for our global civilization.
Right. Now, let me ask you, because I think most people maybe don't know, how did you become an environmentalist in the first place? I mean, because you talked to me about the environment way back when I didn't even understand what you were talking about. It was back in 1984 when you directed Terminator 1.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the thing is, I'm not an environmentalist in the sense that I have any credential or degree as an environmentalist, but I'm an environmental advocate first and foremost, and that's been since I was in high school, really, back in Canada. in the 60s. I just grew up as a naturalist. I spent all my time out in the woods. I love nature. It was part of me. I was part of it. And then in 1970, with the first Earth Day, the environmental movement as we understand it today was really born, for the first time. And people started to realize that there was pollution and there was deforestation and all those things. And so I've tracked that into my adulthood. And of course, I'm a filmmaker and I'm a diver, and I spend a lot of time underwater, and I see the slow degradation of the oceans. I see the degradation of the coral reefs and so on. And that fueled a real interest in this. So I really began to study it in earnest, I would say, about 10 or 12 years ago, like really focus on it and really focus on the solutions and make myself a sort of lay expert on it. And, so that's why I'm such a strong advocate now.
Right. And you have not been happy about the progress that has been made. None of us are. No. So the question really is that all of a sudden out of nowhere, you came years ago and you said, I'm not eating any more meat.
Yeah.
I said, what? You're not eating any more meat? And then you were explaining to me why meat is bad for your health and all that stuff, which of course doctors have said for years. So you have really been on that. And then you started talking and tying it into the environment. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think it was about the psychology of individual choice and what we can do as individuals to empower ourselves in this conversation, because there's a lot of bleakness. There's a lot of anxiety around climate. Some people feel crushed by it. Some people are in denial about it. Some people cling to demagogic leaders who tell you, don't worry about it, just roll over and go back to sleep. It's all going to be fine. And people are happy to have somebody tell them it's all going to be fine. So they just stop thinking about it. But I think the people that are intelligent enough to know that this isn't going to go away unless we do something about it, feel a deep anxiety. Like, what can I do about it? One person. It takes all of civilization to make these bad things happen with our energy use and our pollution and so on. What can I do about it? And so, first I was focused on renewable energy, and then I started to read more about the impact of our dietary choices on the environment in general, climate change specifically, but also ocean pollution, river pollution, deforestation, habitat destruction, all that. And the one thing that was in common from all those different bad things that were happening was our choice to eat animal products instead of living lower on the food chain and just eating the plants directly. I explained this to Rupert Murdoch. He was trying to figure out what this whole vegan thing was all about. And I said, it's very simple. The fundamental principle of business is you cut out the middleman, right? So the animals take a huge tax from us, from our world, for being the middleman between us and the plants. You take them out, you eat the plants directly, things get much more efficient. Like in terms of land use, maybe 10 times more efficient. In terms of carbon footprint for an individual, maybe a third, maybe a quarter of what you were. So I thought, aha, this is something everybody can do. Now, everybody can also change their religion too, but they won't. So it gets into now human motivation and human will and our ability to, process information and internalize it and do something about it.
Right.
So my wife and I did it. You've done it. You've gone largely plant-based, for health and for environmental reasons.
Right. Now, let me ask you, we're in a movie business. And in the movie business, I would say most of the people are kind of like real environmentalists, and they talk about the environment and all this kind of stuff. But I don't really see their participation to be actively involved in the whole thing. Like, for instance, when you are the only one that has built solar panels on top of your studio here in Los Angeles, south of Los Angeles. Yeah. But the other ones, when you fly over with the helicopter over Universal or Warner Brothers or Columbia or whatever, or Disney, there is no solar panels over the studios. Yeah. Although there's huge areas that you can actually, blanket with solar panels.
Yeah, we're not living in Alaska, or some extremely cloudy place. It's Los Angeles. You've got 320, pure sun days a year. If you can't do solar there, you can't do it anywhere. And you've got these broad roofs. If you fly over LA, it's a very wide, flat city. It's low population density, and they got, hundreds of square miles of rooftops, flat rooftops, industrial rooftops. And I thought, and it was exactly like you said. I was flying one day. I was coming into LAX on an airliner, and I'm looking down and I'm seeing all these acres and acres and acres of these industrial rooftops and thinking, why aren't we doing solar? It generates power where you need it. You don't need these big transmission lines. You're generating it right at, and it's highly distributed, right? Well, of course, it's the utilities, and it's their lock on government with their powerful lobbies and so on. There's always somebody in the food chain somewhere doing better off of keeping things the way they are than allowing for change. But you know, people like us, we try to lead by example. We try to live by example, and you know, walk the walk.
Right, exactly. You have been always very good in kind of writing about the future, you know, and predicting the future. I mean, hell, when you think about Terminator 1, all the stuff that we talked about became a reality.
Sure.
And so now the question really is, what do you see the future be when it comes to the environment? I mean, do you see that we can hit our goals and not have these huge increases in temperatures and stuff like that, or having continuous 7 million people die every year because of pollution? Do you think that we're going to make any headway here?
I think anybody that says they can predict the future, you know, is a liar. I mean, I couldn't have predicted in January where we were going to be today with this global pandemic. But I think that, you know, what I can predict is that we have a choice. We have a choice. We're smart. You know, we have this thing called consciousness. None of the other creatures in the animal kingdom have that ability to look at the future and plan against it, you know, or plan for it, I should say. So it's going to boil down to a lot of choices. And in some ways, they're sort of political and they're philosophical. You know, are you going to accept what people tell you, or are you going to go to the scientists, and are you going to really vet those things that challenge your belief system? I mean, so many people believe. I think belief is a critical issue here in this choice. If you believe that climate change is a hoax because you've heard that from people that you believe other things from, without checking on it, without doing your own independent research, without seeing what the scientists are really saying, then you're going to make the wrong political decisions. And we see people doing that right now. And I happen to think that we're at a real pivot point in history. If we turn our backs on science, if we turn our backs on critical thinking that allows us to find out the truth of things, we're doomed. But we're smart, you know, we're also smart. And we talk and we do things like this, conclaves like this, where we talk it out. And there are certainly a lot of people that believe wholeheartedly in the science and are trying to do something about it. Unfortunately, not enough of them are in power right now. So the question is also a political question. So as much as we need to empower people to, to eat plants, to drive electric, to embrace solar, to do all of the various initiatives that they need to do, we also have to tell them to get out and vote, and vote these assholes out, basically. Yeah. Pretty simple.
No, absolutely. Now, before I go, I just want to ask you a movie question, if you don't mind, even though I told it
okay, all right,
an
sure.
environmental kind of interview. But I mean, is there anything, I know you're in the middle of shooting Avatar. I know you had to get up now to do this interview because of the time change here in New Zealand and all that stuff. Tell me, is there anything newsworthy that we should know of? I mean, when is the movie coming out in the theaters and what's going on there?
Well, COVID hit us like it hit everybody, hit us hard. We lost about 4.5 months of production. As a result of that, we've rolled around one more full year for a release in December of 22. That's been announced already. Now, that doesn't mean that I have an extra year to finish the film, because the day we deliver Avatar 2, we'll just start working on finishing Avatar 3. So where we are right now, I'm down in New Zealand shooting. We're shooting the remainder of the live action. We've got about 10% left to go. We're 100% complete on Avatar 2. And we're sort of 95% complete on Avatar 3. So we're just, we're very lucky in that we chose this as our production site years ago. We made the first film here in New Zealand, and it turns out to be one of it's ranked either the first or second best country in the world for its COVID response. Sometimes Germany's in the #1 spot, sometimes New Zealand's in the #1 spot. But we're actually able to operate. We're at level 2 here right now. But we're able to operate, we're able to shoot, and we're able to have a more or less normal life here. So we were very fortunate. So I don't see any roadblocks to us getting the picture finished, getting both pictures finished. Other than that, I can't tell you about the story. I can't give you any big scoops. You're certainly welcome as an individual to come anytime and I'll show you everything. But in terms of what I can release, I believe in the mystery and the great reveal.
Well, first of all, as you know, I have visited your studio and you many times during the shooting of Avatar.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed, I love the technology and I love the way, how genius you work and, you know, the collaboration and all of this stuff. So congratulations on all that great work and good luck with Avatar. And thank you very much for all the work you're doing for the environment. Thank you very much for this.
Hey, Arnold, it was great to see you as always, and great to see you with still a big smile on your face, making things happen in the world. From, I think, is that your kitchen?
This is my kitchen, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're still moving the world.
Yeah, thank you.
All right,
see
buddy.
you.
All right, we'll see you.